Just 2 days from right now, Browns will be on the clock. Final days of Browns Draft Buzz 2025 now on the React. Welcome into the OBR Streaming Network. This is the React. My name is Brad Ward, and the man next to me is the always fantastic Pete Smith. What's going on, Pete? Final days, brother. Just hours now. 48 hours away from the beginning of all of this. How are we feeling at this point?
Just get here. Let's go. I'm excited. Obviously, I can't wait to see what they do. But again, this is one of those things, and I know why the NFL does it. I know why they make us wait this long, because it's their never-ending quest to make sure that the league is 365 days a year. But my God, the process is endless, and you just want to get to it. So we're at that point. But hey, 2 days, we'll get there.
Does this feel like it does for me? This feels like the longest draft runway. Just feels like it, probably because of the absence of picks, and then the pick this year in the past years. But this feels like the longest draft process I've ever covered.
Well, certainly part of it is the fact they haven't had picks for a while. And then the other part of it is the season was just over so fast that you're sitting like, in past years, they're playing in the playoffs, and, even though they lost, you're still there. You get an extra week of football, and you're there the whole way. And then there's this process where you sort of get to sort of unpack and enjoy this run that they had and all these other things that are going on and all that. And like for this year, because of the way it fell apart, we've been looking ahead for
a long time,
for beyond the normal, around 4 months, 3 months. It's been more like 5 or 6. And not only that, when you do have the second pick in the draft, as the Browns have, there's only so many guys that it can be. So there is this point where you are just beating these two guys into the ground in terms of just discussing them. I mean,
yeah,
it took long enough to sort of get past the fake reality that people kept putting out there about, oh, they're going to take a quarterback at 2 and all this other crap. But even so, as long as people have milked that element of it, we're still here with 2 guys, and it's exhausting. And unfortunately, because it hasn't been automatic, that has sort of taken away from sort of the rest of the draft, where the Browns have 33rd pick, 2 picks in the 3rd round, and all these other elements that they and with plenty of impetus for them to get it right. I mean, they need to do well. So I mean, that's the other part of it. I think, even though like that has been a given, I do think there's this element of like this front office, this regime, they got to make this one count, and this has more pressure on it than previous drafts. And again, not having picks, and certainly those drafts matter. I think 2023 was great. 2024 has done surprisingly well to this point. But still, this is the one where Andrew Berry, in particular, but Kevin Stefanski as well, they have to get this one right, because if they don't, if we're talking about, disaster of this draft in this next year or 2, it becomes very difficult to sort of keep this thing going.
Yeah, absolutely. It becomes harder and harder to support them in their efforts to dig out of the Watson mess, right? So, and this is their kind of big first step to get out of this in kind of a way. The things about the draft, before we get to our videos tonight, I've got a number of them, some interesting stuff around the draft. We'll listen to some Andrew Berry too today, who did an interview on CBD. But some things about the draft that I just jotted down. That I listened to Todd McShay say, and I wanted to get what your thoughts were on some of these things that he has thrown down as like he believes they're fact from people that he's talking to, right? So, or it not fact, but this is what he believes. So,
well, and in fairness to Todd McShay, he's very open about the fact that Andrew Berry is really good at this game,
yes.
and at sort of the poker element of this and keeping guys guessing. So in reality, what he's doing and what all these draft people are doing is they're talking to other teams and saying what they think the Browns are going to do. And a lot of them are running with it in terms of fact. Now, Todd McShay is not going to that extent, but I've seen that quite a bit with some people in the who are covering this, saying, you know, the Browns have already made their decision, that the Browns are already locked in, and it could work out that way, but I don't think they're on solid ground necessarily.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I don't, as much as I think that I'm comfortable with either outcome at this point. And, you know, I think there's positives to both sides of it. I think that there is a consensus feeling that it is Hunter for sure. And I don't know if that's necessarily the case, because have the Browns really tipped their hand in any way? Like, no. Where has this consensus come from? Like, it's gone so far, Pete. They took pick 2 out of the sports books today.
Yep.
So you can't even bet on it. So, like, they think it's that sure of a thing. But, like, all the noise, to your point, it's not coming from Cleveland. It's not coming from the inner circle. It's just what other GMs and other people around other organizations are saying about the pick, basically. Right?
Sure. And again, they could absolutely be validated, because if the Browns do it, then everybody's going to say, of course, of course, of course. I would just caution people and say, not so fast. It could definitely end up being that way, but I just wouldn't. I certainly wouldn't bet my mortgage on it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I do think that a lot of it is, you know, the Browns have played this very close to the vest all along. All right, so to McShay, just this is not just Browns. Some of it is Browns, but just in general draft stuff. Just want to get your thoughts on it. So in his newsletter and on his podcast, he said the Saints will not take Sanders at 9. They wouldn't take him even at 40.
Well, the basis for that is the New Orleans local beat has been covering this, and the Saints have shown basically no interest in him at all.
Yeah,
they didn't go to pro day. They haven't really shown much interest in him throughout the process. So unless they are faking everybody out, and that would be really weird to do with that position, sure. The one you'd want. I mean, let's look at this standpoint. If the Browns did that, everybody would crush them for it. Understandably, if you literally were like, no, we're going to fake everybody out by doing virtually no research, not going to see it about any of these things, and then just picking him. Hey, they did that once. His name was Justin Gilbert. Like, it was a disaster. So that's those are the tea leaves that these guys are reading. They're basically saying, listen, the Saints have done virtually no work on him compared to these other guys. Whereas, I think you're thinking of Bo Nix. But yeah, you can do it that way. I'd be very hard pressed to say it. So certainly at 9, I don't think he's in the question. I think at 40, he's in the conversation. But here's the thing with the Saints. I don't think the Saints are compelled the way the Browns are or the Giants are, where they feel like they have to come out with a quarterback. I think they're going to play the board a little bit more honestly than either of those two teams are.
So let me ask you that, dude, just right from that point, I feel like, and I understand why you say that, because it feels that way. Do you think the Browns feel that way? Like they have to come out with a quarterback like at 33? Like it feels like a foregone conclusion there too. But like, I'm like, you know, based on what Jimmy said, based on what we know about the class next year, I feel like, yes, I do want them to swing on quarterback if they love the guy. Like if they love Milroe, that's great. But like you are passing up on what should be a 2-contract starter. It's basically a first round pick at 33. And if you spend it on a project quarterback and then turn around and go take another quarterback next year, that's a wasted asset.
So no, I don't think it is a lock that 33 or that pick being traded is going to end up being a quarterback, but I do think it's a strong chance.
Okay.
The big thing you have to keep in mind with the Browns is, as it currently stands, they don't have a quarterback under contract in 2026. So even if they were to take a quarterback at 33, they could easily come back next year and take another quarterback and feel like good about it. And no, you probably wouldn't feel great about using a second round pick or a late first round pick on a guy who you may not feel is your starter. But like, if you're the Browns, you're sitting here going, we have to get this right. We're going to take as many swings as necessary to get this right. And ultimately, if at the end of this process, they come away with the right quarterback and get it, you're going to be fine with, within reason, whatever it took to get there, because that's ultimately been the things that's been holding you back. They've been able to do so much with the rest of the roster that if they can just figure that piece of it, then they can go really far and be consistent. And ultimately, if the Browns want to be a consistent contender, they've got a good quarterback, right? So I think the likelihood is stronger than not that 33rd pick is going to become a quarterback, but it is not fate.
You think that swing is worth it, though, even if they come back next year?
Yeah. You have to get this right. Like,
okay,
say what you will. Again, it will not feel good if you take Shedeur Sanders at 33, or you take Jalen Milroe, or you take Jackson Dart with that pick, and then you come back and go, it's just not. We're not comfortable with it, because ultimately, this is one of those things where, let's say they do it, and they take a quarterback, and they take a rookie quarterback, and that quarterback gets hurt or something, and then the quarterback they took this year suddenly breaks out. We've seen that happen. That happened with Drew Brees.
Yeah.
With the Chargers. And if that is the case, I mean, then you can trade one of those guys for assets and get some of that back. But ultimately, you're going to live with it if it means getting the quarterback position right.
Yep. I think that ultimately makes sense. It's just hard to stomach in the moment, right? At least for me, it is a little bit. All right. Another thing that I've kind of heard, this isn't just from McShay, but from a lot of people, there is a plateau of talent in this draft from, say, somewhere around 12 to 40-ish. Do you believe that to be true?
I think it's right after basically three plus Genty.
Yeah.
Once you get past, 3, and then you sort of make the determination of who's going to take the running back, then it drops off a cliff. I think Mason Graham is a phenomenal player. He's not in the same conversation as Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, or Ashton Genty. So once you get past those 3 guys, or whoever you want to throw in there, they're just not in that conversation. And for some people, they include Cam Ward in that. That's fine. But ultimately, once you get past those guys, it's a huge drop off, which is why there's so much buzz about, is somebody going to try to jump up into that top 3, even if they're just outside of it, to ensure they get one of those players because they feel those guys are just above everybody else.
Yeah. It feels for me like there's, I've heard people say, oh yeah, that, they can't trade down past, and we'll hear some of that with Nathan today with Andrew Berry, like can't trade down past like 6 because there's only so many blue chip players. There's only 3 blue chip players, really. 4 if you count Cam. And that's how it's pretty cut and dry. That's how I see it too. So there is a drop off there. But as far as the talent being like kind of even from there to the 40s, that is, do you agree with that aspect of it?
For the most part, yes. So like, let's say, the idea of the Browns don't want to drop. Like, if you're like, man, I would love to trade down, but I don't love the idea of trading down outside of the top 10.
Yeah.
I kind of disagree. I'm way more open to it. The offer's got to be big enough either way. So if opening that up to like the teens and 20s get you the package that will ultimately take you to get there, so be it. I mean, the only consideration at that point is if you're taking a bunch of future picks, you've got to bet on where that team is going to end up the following year. And just by virtue of if they're picking in the 20s, they were a playoff team and they might be more built to sustain. That might be a reason not to do it. But ultimately, in terms of, am I still going to get a great player at 8 versus 20? I think the talent's going to be pretty even. Obviously, you lose a little bit of your ability to choose at that point, but I think the Browns will be largely comfortable with that, and especially if it is to pick the quarterback they were going to pick anyway. If they're just going to trade down and then just take that quarterback, then that's even less of a reason to worry about it. And then it's just a question of, do they sit there and second guess and go, is that too far, or that type of thing. But beyond that, I think you can maximize the return. And I think the example for that is when the Chiefs traded up for Patrick Mahomes. Like the belief is that the Bills were insistent on getting a first-round pick. They didn't care who it came from, and the Bills were willing to pay it. And they didn't care that the Browns were only moving up 2 spots. They were going to get that package because they were perfectly comfortable with taking a player in that range. So they took the best deal.
Yeah. I mean, you would agree, though, the Browns would have to get a first to go back, though, too, as well, right?
I mean, I can't fathom a world where that isn't part of the package, just because, again, you are talking about the difference between what you expect you are expecting Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter or Ashton Jeanty, if you're talking about these guys, to be a franchise-changing player.
Yes.
Everybody else, you are hoping they get to that level. But those guys, the expectation is they are franchise-changing. So in order to not take one of those, you better get a franchise-changing return, which to me would include a first-round pick next year and whatever else you're going to get in that package. And it would be substantial, enough that you're sitting there going to somebody who's just casually observing, going, okay, I get why they took the deal. And they're not sitting there going, yeah, I probably would have stayed there and just picked the player.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, and we've talked about this, any of those decisions have to involve, how does this impact us getting our franchise quarterback? And adding one next year, I think, greatly increases your chances of attacking that. And what we expect to be, there's no guarantee of it, but we expect to be a greater class of quarterbacks in 2026.
I do, certainly. Now, things can change. I mean, we went into this year and all these people thought Carson Beck was going to be great.
It'd be the best, yeah.
But I just the sheer number of options this coming year, I feel good about what's going to be coming out. And that does not include Arch Manning, because I don't think that's remotely realistic. I don't consider him an option at all. But when you get into the Cade Klubniks, when you get into Drew Lock coming back in school for another year, there are a number of guys that are intriguing that could develop. And then, maybe there's another Carson Beck, but there may be a Cam Ward who went into the process last year and almost came out as sort of a 5th-round pick and then decided to go back to school. And now he's the first pick in the draft. So I think that's the bet you're making. So I have yet to talk to anybody who's not come to the conclusion that they think next year's quarterback class will not be significantly better.
So, listening to McShay again and reading some of the stuff that's out there, there's this feeling that the extra work being done on quarterbacks last minute isn't necessarily for high in the draft, but for that second wave, right? So it's not for 3 or whatever or 9. It's for the second wave, which, and to what he was saying was basically it's more dire for these quarterbacks in the first round than initially thought. Even the number in Vegas has gone from 3.5 in the first round to 2.5 in the first round, right? And that they're falling generally as a class. And he said basically he thinks that it will, in the end, will just be 2 quarterbacks in the first round of this draft. Do you buy that?
I have a hard time seeing it happen.
I doubt it. Yeah.
I still think you're going to get a third one in there somewhere.
Yeah.
But it would be great if only 2 go in the first round. I mean, that would be the dream for the Browns. But I just between the Giants and the Browns and a couple of these other teams who could either just take one or trade back to get one. It's just tough to. I mean, the Pittsburgh Steelers, like, what is the plan? And I'm not suggesting that they have to take a quarterback, but if they did, no one's going to be surprised. So yeah, I think 2.5 is the right number to me. 2.5 is exactly where Vegas should put the line. It's just a question of where they're going to end up.
It's interesting because a month ago I would have said I thought 3.5 was the right number. Because I have thought all along that all 4 would go in the first round, by hook or by crook, even if that's, the Browns moving up 1 spot to take Milroe at 32 or whatever, you know what I mean?
Right.
So either way, that's interesting. All right. So then he went on to say on the same topic that he doesn't believe in talking to people around the league, or he doesn't have a belief that Cleveland will move up from 33. And basically his reasoning for that and he didn't come out and say it, but he was kind of like, they are good with either, like, if 2 guys are there, like, they'll be patient and they'll wait because they're good with really Sanders, Dart, or Milroe. Do you believe that to be true?
I mean, if you believe, as he says he does, that only 2 quarterbacks are going, then the Browns don't need to trade up. If you don't, then the Browns probably do need to trade up. I'm still of the opinion the Browns are probably going to end up moving up a little bit, just because, one, I don't think they view 3 guys the same way. They're completely different quarterbacks. They're either going to settle in on 1 or settle in on 2, and it may be a situation where the second one guy goes that they start calling. We've seen them do this before. When they went and got JOK in the first place, there were 3 guys they were keeping their eye on, and 2 of them went off the board. They started calling and went up and got him. I could see that being the play here. But if they don't have to, they won't. And why would you? If you can sit there and keep all their picks, because they could use all of them and be very happy with it. But if you're asking me what's more likely, I suspect a small trade up, even if it's small, just to ensure they get the guy, they feel good about it, and there's no question, then they can go and high five and feel good about it, and then go into day 2 going, hey, we nailed the 2 things that we made our decision at the second pick or whatever, and then we got the quarterback taken care of. Now we can just focus on talent. We can focus on addressing the things we want to be able to get done with much more flexibility.
You're watching the React on the OBR streaming network. Make sure you have it locked with us all weekend long as we kick off draft coverage tomorrow night with a special video at 7:00. And then on Thursday night, when the draft begins, we will be live on the air at 7, leading up to the beginning of the draft at 8. And we will have you covered for every pick all the way till the end of this thing. In Draft Cave 2025. Come join us. It'll be a blast for sure. So make sure you're locked in on all of that here at the OBR streaming network. Make sure you hit like and subscribe on your way in and out. That's Pete Smith. My name is Brad Ward. Here's our first video of the night. This is from Get Up, courtesy of Get Up and Peter Schrager this morning on the Browns and Giants. It's been kind of going around today, so you may have seen this, but we'll talk about it afterwards. Here you go.
2 days and counting through the draft. And in that spirit, let's drop a Schrager bomb. Peter Schrager is here with D. Wood and Mike Tannenbaum this morning. Peter, drop something on us. What's the most interesting thing you can tell us 2 days before the draft?
Greeny, I've been sitting on my couch watching NBA, watching you guys, texting every GM and every coach, and I will tell you this, around the league, the Titans, they're not listening to trade offers. However, there have been phone calls made to both the Browns at 2 and the Giants at 3 with the intention to move up from several different sources telling me there are teams who are looking to get up in this draft to either the 2 or the 3 spot. The assumption being to move up to the 2 or the 3 spot, it would be for Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, or the running back, Ashton Jeanty, who everyone expects to go somewhere in that 5 to 7 to 8 range. There have been teams making calls, and those teams are not immediately slamming down the phone. The Browns at 2, the Giants at 3. Everyone assumes it's going to be chalk, that this is going to go Cam Ward, it's going to go Travis Hunter, it's going to go Abdul Carter. Not so fast. I think the 2 spot gets very interesting if the Browns are listening to a Godfather deal for them to trade back and someone to trade up into the top 3.
There's so many things about this that I find interesting, and one of them immediately, Mike T, the thing that I immediately go to is the Giants at 3. They're looking to get they most likely would like to get a quarterback, and they keep using the word value. I've heard Joe Schoen use the word value a million times. Maybe there isn't value in taking a quarterback at 3. Maybe you vacate 3, you accumulate a bunch of other picks of some sort, and you still get the quarterback that you want a little bit later down the road. That's what it sounds like to me. What does it sound like to you?
Greedy, I agree. And let's be clear about what Peter is saying. When you're talking about transformational trades like the Giants possibly to get a quarterback, those trades are agreed to today and tomorrow. They are executed on the clock. I made some big trades going up for Mark Sanchez, Darrelle Revis. Agreement and principles with the other team are made ahead of time. They're too important. They're too big. You need the head coach, the owner, and the GM on the same page. So if a big trade like Peter is saying actually happens, Greeny, I would expect very quietly that it's agreed to at some point today or tomorrow. And then by the time we get to Thursday night, it's simply executed. If I'm the Giants, I want to get a quarterback in the future. They didn't take one last year when 6 went in the top 12. So if they could slide back and get a quarterback and get some extra picks, that makes a lot of sense.
Not it.
All right. So this is kind of intriguing to me, Pete, because what Schrager is saying is ultimately nothing in my mind. Like, yes, teams are probably going to be calling, and you should be answering the phone. This is just kind of, I guess, I don't know. Do you make anything of this? This is just, to me, kind of silly season twisting words to make it seem like teams are getting super aggressive to get up in 2 and 3. But, of course, they're going to answer the phone. Of course, teams are calling. It's 2 days before the draft. What are we talking about here?
I mean, it's a product of the fact that there's only one quarterback that is viewed as a consensus pick that's locked in. If there were others, then we're not going to hear as much about this because nobody's going to want to move their pick. Anything other than quarterback, there's at least a conversation. Teams aren't necessarily against moving away if they can get a huge haul. So you're going to have those conversations, and the Browns could certainly make a trade and do something along those lines. But it's got to be a huge haul. And I still don't think a team is going to pony up enough that the Browns are going to move out of the pick. I think the name he mentioned that I think has more interest is Jeanty, for the reason I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
He's the best talent that's sort of unsettled as to where they're going to go. Everybody knows or is pretty certain that it's going to go Ward and then either Hunter or Carter and Hunter. Jeanty's the lone sort of premier talent, even if it's not at a position everybody wants to give up a huge haul for. But he's the one where I think things get more interesting, and especially if you're the New England Patriots, because you need a whole lot of things. Your team is awful, especially on offense, but they just need a ton of help. So if somebody's willing to give them assets that can really set them up for the future, then by all means, they can take a big trade and somebody can come up and get Ashton Jeanty, and Ashton Jeanty can be great for a team. But that's where I think the most likely pivot point is going to be. It's Jeanty. I think the other 2 teams are largely going to be settled. Even with the Giants, I with both the Browns and the Jets, they need franchise-changing talent, like in a way that other teams don't. They have to get somebody who's going to be a marquee player for them, and I don't know that they're going to be able to get enough that's going to move off them. Maybe the Giants are more inclined because then they can move back, feel like they got a whole bunch of extra picks, and then take a quarterback. I don't know, but I think Jeanty is the one that's probably the most likely to see movement.
Yeah, I think so too. It's interesting. There was in 2017, Pete, I heard this either yesterday or today. That was a record-setting running back class, right? I think that was the McCaffrey class. Somebody else was up in front of him, if I recall. Who was that? Anyways, in 17, and 23 running backs went on day 3 in that class. So when I hear a lot of people talking about like, hey, 10 backs are going to go, in day 1, day 2, I get the feeling that like teams are going to be patient on the running backs because there just are so many of them. And maybe we see a similar outcome to like that year.
Yes, except there may be one team who just looks at Genty and says he's that much better than everybody else.
Yeah, outside of Genty.
Yeah.
And
but other than that, yes, I
Yeah.
think the Browns are going to be patient with running back. I think there's going to be a lot of teams that are patient with running back because I think there are going to be a whole lot of starters that come out of this class, guys who are going to contribute, so guys who teams will pick. Fans won't know who the name of the player was, but had never heard of them before their team picked them, and suddenly they are an impact player for them in a way that they can contribute. And just the way the NFL sort of shifted the running back position, you can get incomplete players that fill roles and do good things for you. I mean, Saquon Barkley is sort of, is the do-it-all running back, but even with him, it didn't work for him with the Giants until, because they didn't have the blocking, and then he goes to the Eagles, and now he's the most dominant player in the league. So if there's a team that sits there and goes, we feel like we have the blocking or can get there, that we can make Ashton Genty special, then I could see it. But other than that, I think teams are going to be super patient. And like I said, I've been saying the entire time with the Browns, I hope they take 2 running backs. And if Nick Chubb isn't signed by the time the draft is over, I'm bringing in an undrafted rookie as well. So I'll get 3 and see what shakes out.
I think there are a couple others that are worth, obviously, I think, higher draft picks. Caleb Johnson Henderson, I think, is worth it. Who else? Marion Hampton, I think. I've seen him mocked a lot to Denver, which is kind of scary at 20, and kind of matches what they want to do. So those guys, I think, are also worth it. But there's talent for days in this class. So,
and the cost control element is big. You can essentially keep a running back under a very low cost relative to the position for like 6 years, because not only do you have the initial rookie 4 years, 5th year option, then the franchise tag is nothing at that position. So you end up in a situation where, as sad as it is to say, that may be the running backs largely their whole career at that point. So there is some merit to taking a guy in the first round. I don't love it because I just think you're going to want to get other positions that are more impactful or more difficult to get. But I at least can appreciate the argument. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay. Let's move on to Andrew Berry did a spot on Cleveland Browns Daily today with Nathan Zagura. We have that ready, and we'll watch some of that. Just holler at me, Pete, if you want me to stop at any point here.
Radical exercise that there's a really talented offensive player who some have compared to Shohei Ohtani, who can do multiple things, and there's this really talented defensive player. And you have needs for both. Obviously, you can only pick one. How does it go about getting, just from the philosophical side, offense, scoring versus defense, and then getting into a consensus? And I guess ultimately you don't need a consensus. You're in this chair because you're going to make that final decision, but I'm sure you would like to get near a consensus. What's that process like, arguing when you're talking about 2 incredibly talented players?
Yeah, I guess, we would probably look at this draft. There are more than just 2 incredibly talented players. Obviously you're talking about Travis and Abdul.
It's a theoretical.
But there are also a number of really good quarterbacks at the top of the board. Guys that are leading the trenches. So all of that comes into play. And it's usually less about, okay, this player versus that player, but how do you ultimately maximize like the full allotment of your picks? Because there is a little bit of a supply and demand issue as you work through the draft at some positions. But obviously, the first priority is to try and get the best player that you possibly can. So those are all the discussions that that we're having right now, and we'll work through over the next 72 hours.
And I know you guys are at the forefront of probably getting any angle you can to get an advantage. But how has the league changed, and thus perhaps a prioritization of offense versus defense or particular positions in that, even over the last 5 years, and for you going back to even let's say 2016? Because I imagine it seems like a lot. It seems like there's a very strong correlation between your ability to score points consistently and to win in the NFL.
I think the beauty of the NFL is there are a number of ways that you can construct a team and win. Certainly, the easiest path forward is have a highly effective quarterback,
I love Nathan, but this is he has an agenda here a little bit. If you listen to some of the facts that he's spewing right there, obviously, you know what he wants them to do all along. But it's interesting that he brings up the correlation to the points, right? And then you get the pushback from Andrew.
Right. Well, the thing is, like, as long as you have the quarterback piece, you can do whatever you want with the rest of it. The Kansas City Chiefs, the last couple of years, have been a defensive team. They, like the entire season, regular season, we've watched them and gone, how are they going to get the offense going enough for when they get to the postseason? And last year, 2 years ago now, they were able to win the Super Bowl. This past year, they were not. But their defense has been their calling card. They've been fourth in terms of total points per game given up each of the last 2 years. So they're top 5 in that mark. The Browns in 2023 were number 1, and they went to the playoffs. So as long as you get the quarterback piece right, you can win however the hell you want. Certainly, you want both. You want to have great defense and great offense. But like this idea that you have to do a certain way, I don't subscribe to that theory because I've seen too many teams do it however they want, so long as the quarterback piece is right. And then the other piece of that is, let's say the Browns take Travis Hunter this year and they get a quarterback they feel good about at 33, however they do it, and they're going to go with that guy next year. And then, so they're back in the draft. They could easily be taking a defensive lineman in the first round.
Yeah.
Likewise, if they take Abdul Carter at 2 and they take a quarterback and they feel good about them, they could be in the market for a wide receiver in the first round next year. Like, these things are cyclical. So focusing too much on what do I have to get right this second isn't really the way to go, because ultimately, whether it's 6 months from now, a year from now, or 5 years from now, nobody's going to give a shit. They're only going to be concerned with one thing: how good was the player they picked it to? And if that guy's a superstar, the guy we're talking about in terms of like, Hall of Fame potential, they're not going to care if they play wide receiver or defensive end. They're just going to be happy they got the Hall of Fame player. Now, if both guys are on a Hall of Fame track, then there's an argument. But like, what you don't want to have happen is, whether it's 2 years or 5 years, you take a guy because you decided that you needed that thing. They stink. The other guy's great. And now you're sitting there, well, we had to take the guy to improve our offense. Well, you didn't. You made that the thing. There were other avenues to improve your offense. You insisted on making it a all or nothing venture with the second pick in the draft. That's not how the Browns should play this, in my view. They should just take what they feel is the best player in the draft, because they could use both. So, and I think, I think that's why Andrew Berry's pushing back here a little bit. That's not to tip his hand one way or the other, but he's right. You've seen it. The Kansas City Chiefs are a great example. The Philadelphia Eagles, don't get me wrong, we've talked about the show. They are just stupidly talented across the board, but their defense wrecked the Chiefs. The end of the third quarter in the Super Bowl, the Philadelphia Eagles defense had 7 points. The Chiefs had 6. So, like, yes, they scored 34 in that span ultimately total, but their defense had such control that Patrick Mahomes was completely destroyed, and that defense had complete control of the game. The offense largely became academic at that point and just sort of put it out of reach. But, like, as long as you're really good at something, you can win however you want. It's the same thing where, like, we'll see ultimately where the Bengals end up. I still applaud them for going, hey, I've got Joe Burrow, I've got Jamar Chase, and I've got T. Higgins. why am I going to mess with this? I'm going to keep all of them, keep this dominating advantage. We'll figure out the rest.
Yeah.
Don't give up that. And the difference there is they obviously have all these guys, whereas the Browns are choosing their path. But nevertheless, they can win a whole lot of games by having that dominant advantage at that position. The Pittsburgh Steelers have won 10 games, 10 games, 10 games, 10 games. They have arguably the 3 best edge rushers in terms of pass rush in the entire league between TJ Watt, what's his face? Who am I missing?
Highsmith.
Alex Highsmith, and then they've got Herbig. Like in terms of like pass rush efficiency, those guys are out of this world, and that has been along with having Cam Hayward and those other guys, that has powered them to be great and win games. So I don't pick your path. And ultimately, the goal here at the number 2 pick isn't I've got to get great players as long as they do A, B, and C. Outside of the fact we should get a premium position. Both of these guys qualify. But beyond that, just pick the guy you think is going to be the best player, because ultimately that's only thing anyone's going to care about in 6 months or 5 years from now.
Yeah, no qualifiers. The best player, full stop, right? Like, no, not the best player that can do this, that, the other, and that makes sense. All right.
Highly efficient passing offense, that usually is pretty stable and that endures over time. But if you're a team that doesn't have, Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, like you do have to find other ways to win. And I think you've seen that if you go through, the playoff teams, the way that actually, let's just take Kansas City. The way Kansas City won, early in Patrick's career versus maybe the past couple of years is very completely different. The way that, Denver and Pittsburgh, made the playoffs was a lot different than the way that, Detroit did. And so, I think there are multiple avenues that you can take, and a big part of that just depends on the players who are available to you.
All right, so you talked about the quarterback position, and obviously when you're picking second and in need of a quarterback, you'd like there to be a guy that is worthy. And we'll find out if you think there is a quarterback worthy of that number 2 overall pick. But going into it, you're going to have Kenny Pickett, a former first-round pick in his own right, 15-10 as a starter in the league, and Joe Flacco, who was very successful for us a few years ago. In some ways, if the board doesn't fall necessarily the way you want it with the quarterback position, is Kenny Pickett 26? He's won 15 games, 2/3 or 3/5 of his starts in the league. Is he somebody you could look at as a real swing at that position?
Yeah, I think, with the players that we have in the room right now, we obviously know Joe very well from his time with us in 2023. Kenny's a player we did a lot of work on, ahead of the draft, and obviously saw a number of starts against him when he's with Pittsburgh. And we do think that Kenny has a skill set that marries really well with what Kevin wants to do offensively. He's mobile, he has a good arm, he's really smart, and we do think that he has some of his best football ahead of him. But that also doesn't mean that we're not necessarily going to add to the room as we go through the course of the offseason, and it could be as early as this week.
How important when you're looking at the quarterback position is saying, okay, we've got Kevin. It sounds like we want to go back to kind of some of that offense that he ran a few years ago, to finding a quarterback who excels in that system versus maybe the best piece of clay.
So I think we'll always look for the best piece of clay, like quite frankly.
Okay.
And you want to try and get the best player that you can at the position. And Kevin's smart enough and adaptable enough to cater a scheme around a player's strengths. That's something that that we all believe in. But also realizing that quarterbacks can produce at a really high level in a variety of ways. The way that Brock Purdy produces is totally different than the way that Lamar Jackson produces.
Yes.
But they're still both, excellent quarterbacks, in the NFL, and that's something that we have to be aware of.
All right.
So I would kick myself if I didn't make the point that, and believe me, I love Kevin Stefanski, but organizationally, not so much on Kevin. Their first attempt at adapting to a different skill set at quarterback was an epic fail.
I assume you're talking about Watson.
Yes.
I mean, they did. They tried to cater to him as much as possible. I put more of that on Watson than anything else, but that comes down to they shouldn't have made that deal in the first place and put themselves in that position. I'm just saying it wasn't very... I agree with you. You put yourself in a position where you allow them to then dictate how things are going to go, and you sort of lose control in some respects. It's not how you want to go. And that's also part of the reason I think the Browns are very committed to finding the answer through the draft. I don't think they want to go that route again, where they are sort of putting
Beholden
themselves.
to the
Yeah, they're putting
players.
themselves at the whims of somebody else.
yeah.
So I do think that's an important piece. And that's also why, as sort of we've reported, they've done an insane amount of research on these guys.
Yeah.
Now, some of that is by virtue of the fact that they have literally had people in various buildings that now work for the team. But nevertheless, they want to get everything on these guys in terms of how they tick and their football character and all these things at that position, because it's just so critically important, and because they don't have the rope at this point. They've got to get it right and figure out something that's going to allow them to be successful. And I think people will sort of be able to live with it if the results are not immediate, but they're going to want to feel good about the development curve and the person that they ultimately took.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
At the beginning, you kind of said we're going to take all our time. We can pick a player, we can trade a player for a veteran, or we can trade down. When you go into a draft, and I'm not asking you for the number, but is there a number of what you guys call blue chip players on your draft board?
Yeah, so we do tier our prospects, and in any given class, that like not all draft classes are created equally,
Right.
and in 1 year it could be potentially deep with elite caliber prospects, and others it can be a little bit shallower. So yeah, that is something we do. I think it's something that's probably pretty commonplace across the league.
So with that knowledge, if you're picking at second, if you are to trade back, do you want to stay in whatever, make sure like, hey, if we think there's, let's call it 6, we think there's 7, 5, that you don't want to go out of that blue chip, or does it depend on the compensation that would make you maybe more comfortable to get out of what we call the blue chip players?
I think it would depend on the cost of the deal, and I think it would depend on the position that the prospects play, and thereby their impact on the game. No two classes are alike, and I'd like to sit here and say that it was there's a cookie cutter way to approach it, but that just isn't the case.
Are you surprised there have not been any pre-draft trades yet in the first round?
Not necessarily. I guess I'd have to check what it's been. Maybe
So
this. Maybe you know this.
1993, when Joe Montana was traded to the Kansas City Chiefs. This is the closest to the draft that there's been without a first-round trade, and this is the first year in the modern draft era that all 32 teams have had their first-round pick.
How about that? I did not know that.
So
I guess I am surprised.
And you like the art of the deal. You enjoy that. So are you a little surprised that there hasn't been what we call typical wheeling and dealing at this point?
Well, maybe that just means it'll be a more eventful Thursday night, if that's the case.
Well, you're looking forward to getting to Thursday night. When you look at this draft overall, it's not just about pick number 2. There's pick number 33. There's a possibility now that pick's been traded 3 years in a row. Sometimes a move up. Sometimes somebody's come up to 33. When you look at kind of,
I didn't realize that pick had been traded 3 years in a row, although it does make sense when you account for I've always kind of that pick is one of the most interesting in the draft generally, I think, if you're just a fan of the draft because of the overnight aspect of it, right?
Yeah, you get 16 hours to sort of just sit there and simmer and talk yourself into whatever weird things. I think that becomes a massive opportunity for the team that holds the pick, because teams get impatient and they want to make sure they cross this thing off the list. They don't want to mess around with it. It's really interesting from that standpoint. What I find interesting about this whole dynamic is, and just sort of casually seeing people in the chat, is when you watched the press conference that he did with the media, by virtue of the fact that, and a bunch of people yelled at me on Twitter over this, I pointed out the fact that there were a million questions about Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
And one about Abdul Carter was about his injury situation, which Andrew Berry was going to say yes no matter what. Because either yes, they feel comfortable about his health, or yes, they don't feel comfortable about his health, but they don't want to ruin it for somebody who could potentially give them a whole bunch of draft assets to go get him.
Sure.
But regardless, so the impression everybody came out of that press conference with was, oh, of course they're going to pick Travis Hunter. It's the only thing that anybody talked about. Whereas now I'm seeing people in the chat sort of look at this and go, wow, it sounds like it sounds like they're paying Abdul Carter keeps talking about defense. Like, this is the thing where, and I've been trying to say to people, like, don't like bet it all on one thing. They could easily go in either direction because there are really compelling arguments for both sides.
Yeah, and once again, and guys have been open about this, the Kuipers, McShays of the world that they don't know. It's up until a week ago, it was, we know nothing about Cleveland, right? Like we know nothing. It's a mystery. They're not leaking anything. And I still think that's the case, but I just think that a little bit of recency bias with the Colorado Showcase coming last, the hype surrounding that, leading into in his press conference at the Combine, where Barry kind of gushed over Hunter's numbers and went on for some amount of time about his statistics. People kind of point to that as a you know what I mean, as a tipping point, although I don't think it necessarily is.
Well, also, Carter's sort of out of sight, out of mind. He hasn't done
Yes.
anything since the playoffs because
Yes.
he wasn't able to work out at the Combine. He spoke, but that was it. And then he didn't work out at Pro Day. So his last football thing was in January. And Travis Hunter hadn't done a thing until he kind of did some stuff at Pro Day. Like,
Yeah.
he didn't really have an active draft process either, but he's at least done something. So you've seen him do things, and that always has an impact in terms of how these things go. But what's always been sort of interesting with the draft is how often what you think immediately coming out of the season tends to sort of, it loops around and ends up being exactly what most teams thought, right? Or what most people expected the team to do right out of the regular season. So
Yeah.
we'll see which way they end up going. But, like, that's why I've been cautious to say I wouldn't be so sure it's one or the other.
That's what gave me pause when, I'm like, man, you got to be kidding me. The sportsbook are taking it down. Like, at this point, like, I know it's trending that way, and you have all the insiders saying that's a lock, but like, how sure are they that it's a lock? I don't think they are. I think that's what they're hearing from other people, to our point earlier. So
That too, and then going to 33, the possibilities that you have there, almost kind of a second first-round pick. How important is it to you that those two are real impact players for this organization?
I mean, I think with every pick, ideally you'd like to get an impact player. There are only so many of those that exist, and certainly only so many of those that exist in a given class. I think what we're more focused on are on players that have the best, long-term odds of sustained success. It's less about a particular guy hitting the ground running because rookies acclimate at their own pace, but we're really focused more on what the individual can be at maturity.
Do you feel like this draft, and we've heard pundits say this, but that when you get into, let's call it, pick 50, there's actually some good depth in that kind of, call it, late second through third and maybe into the early fourth, where the Browns happen to have, at least right now, 3 picks?
Yeah, I think there's talent across all positions. I think there's certainly certain positions where it's probably deep into day 2 of the draft. But you'll probably have to ask me in 3 years. I mean, nobody really knows at this point, is the truth.
Has the way we viewed running backs in the National Football League changed over the course of the last 5 years?
I think it has league-wide, but probably more in the, call it, negative direction. Or maybe negative is the wrong way to put it. I think people on teams would tell you they realize, like, look, this is a player who's going to touch the ball 250 to 300 times in a given year, and you want the best player that you can. I think there's also the conflict in players at the running back position just typically have less longevity, and the challenge becomes, okay, like, how do you value that from a resource allocation perspective, whether it's with picks or dollars? I think that's really the tension or conflict, so to speak. But I don't think that means that, like, the league as a whole is not, as the running back position, is unimportant.
Always.
So I thought that was interesting the way he answered the questions, but like there was definitely was in this year, especially with the emergence of cover two shells across the league, there was a resurgence of the importance at that position, right?
Yes, that and the offensive line being able to produce holes. But yeah, I mean, the amount of defenses that are trying to keep everything in front of them, avoid getting beat deep, it begs teams to be able to run the ball effectively, and that really hurts when the Browns have been so bad at it for the past 2 years. It really limits their options. And then at the same time, you're sitting there going, well, why aren't they trying to go downfield? Well, they can't. Teams are taking that away from them, so they've got to find a way to force teams to play more guys in the box and give them more opportunities to take shots. Or if teams want to sit there and sit in that cover two and play back and all this other stuff, punish them for it over and over and over again. I think the most interesting part, the way he's talking about it, is in terms of touches. He's the 250, 300 touches, or however many rushing attempts you're going to get over a whole season. You have to come up with your plan, your methodology for finding the best way to maximize those touches, whether it's one guy getting the vast majority of them, or if it's like three guys that all do something different, or could be similar, but that all those three guys, then the aggregate is going to make up for the fact that you don't have necessarily that Ashton Genty-like presence, or what you've had with Nick Chubb for so long. That's going to be the interesting dynamic. Everything suggests the Browns are going to take it more of a piecemeal approach, which I approve. Also, that's just some of that's just a matter of the talent in this class. But ultimately, I think, and Andrew Berry has talked about this before, his inclination is to bet on the line to produce for the running back position. Make your investments there, get that to be consistent, and then you can make good things happen behind it far easier than the other way around. And the easy example to point to is even when they had Nick Chubb and he was great, they were also able to have guys like Duke Johnson and Kareem Hunt, or like Dearness Johnson out of nowhere, who goes for 100 and something yards in a rainy game against the Denver Broncos. And Dearness Johnson was good in that game, but a lot of that is because they've been able to reliably run block for those guys and do a good job and win up front. And I think that experience and that success helps to inform them. Now, there may be a world where, and I don't think the Browns are there this draft. I just think they have too many other things they have to tackle. But there may be a world, like if you're sitting there like the Denver Broncos and you're sitting there going, man, we've got this great offensive line. We've got our rookie quarterback. We feel pretty good about our wide receivers, and maybe we want a tight end or something. But maybe we're the team where we go, the running back might be the final piece of the puzzle, and it makes a far more sense in the way that the Eagles did it with Saquon Barkley. Right now, I don't think the Browns are there. I think they have too many other issues to deal with. Quarterback, offensive line, for building it for the future, skilled players, overall weapons, but that doesn't preclude them from getting a really good running back or two out of this class.
I've always thought about this with the whole by committee single running back, or, like you said, a couple guys, being able to produce in the aggregate the same way a lead back will. Isn't there something to finding a rhythm and feel for the game that gets taken away from guys that have to share duty like that?
Maybe it's tough. Like when it comes to running backs, just the way that these guys have played it, having done it in youth and, into middle school and then high school, and like so many of these guys, you by this point, for the most part, you either have figured it out or you haven't. And that process of sort of weeding people out is largely taken care of. Like, the guy that jumps out at me is when the 49ers drafted Isaac Guerendo. out of Louisville, and everybody's like, Isaac Guerrero is going to be awesome. Look at his athletic testing. Look at all these things he could do. And then you watched him, and I won't say he had no feel for the game, but like there was a reason that like nobody was talking about him until he did this crazy athletic testing. There have been guys like that where, you know, a guy like, for me, Devin Neal out of Kansas doesn't have eye-popping athleticism, but he just gets it. He understands how to play positions. LaQuint Allen from Syracuse, who isn't a great athlete necessarily, but I think is just like a football genius because of his feel for the game and contact balance and all those things. And Nick Chubb had all of it. Nick Chubb was a genius in terms of understanding how to play running back, but he also had, you know, the immense physical talent that will allow him to sort of reach the pinnacle of the position. So is there an element to feel? Perhaps. I think that largely is a case-by-case thing. For the most part, I think within reason, I think guys are largely going to hit the ground running and go and be able to be effective without too much of that. Largely, you know, you don't – I know Derrick Henry's sort of the example of a guy who's supposed to wear down the defense, and I get it, but like they aren't – they could wear down the defense with somebody else and then have him close if that was really the thing. They clearly think he's good enough and able to do all these things in the first three quarters and do that, which is why if the Browns want to do that, they could get guys who are going to sort of wear out the defense and then bring in a hammer and a closer at the end of the fourth quarter or whatever, a big power back like Raheem Rocket Sanders or somebody that's a bigger back, or Damian Martinez or Cam Scattaboo, those type of guys, if they want to use other guys to sort of soften the team up. I think that's the appeal, is you get a little bit of all of it, and then can deploy them as you feel good about it. And hopefully in that world, you are tiring them out. They're not tiring you out.
Yeah. There's always an example, and it's always so frustrating for me, and it's easier said that, you know, when you're watching a game, but like different style running backs, I feel like work in different game flows sometimes, or game scripts, right? So like you'll see a guy, this has happened with the Browns a lot this year sometimes, like, well, you know, one back is struggling and getting back in the backfield. It doesn't look like he can get upfield or make a cut or get anywhere. And then they'll go to another back, and there's just something about the way that he runs, and his decision-making is, you know, less east-west, more north-south, and that finds more success. And he runs for 6, he runs for 7, he runs for 8, and then they take him out and they put the other guy back in and he struggles. And that just has always driven me insane. It's like, if the guy has a feel for the game, let him run. You know what I mean? I guess. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it happened with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, because Nick Chubb was a guy who wanted to be patient and wait. And every so often you run into a game where a team would just stop that. And Kareem Hunt just ran, you know, as hard as he could, as fast as he could, into a hole. And there were times where that was able to sort of catch the defense by surprise, where, you know, they were so attuned to try to stop Chubb that it sort of allowed for that. But I don't, you know, I think that feeds into the idea of being more of a by committee approach, because then you can sort of do that. Now, judging, I think the judgment of that largely comes down to the head coach and the running back coach as to how they should be deployed. But I mean, that's the weakness of having one true feature back, is that if teams get attuned to that guy, then they can sort of stop him, where you want to have the ability to change it up in a way that causes the defense more problems.
Last year, a lot of free agents get big deals and play very well for their teams. And Saquon obviously just got rewarded bigly by Philadelphia. All right, you guys go through a lot of simulations. Is that something that goes on this week, or are we done with kind of the simulations?
We just finished up today, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many times did you walk out of these simulations pumped?
I'll be honest, Nate.
Is it like 25% we're pumped, 50 middle, 50 we're happy?
It's not really for that. It's actually really more to tease out stress points. That's really more how we use it, or if we take maybe an alternate path, what that could potentially look like. So I'd say it's less about maybe going to there out feeling great, like, all right, this is what's going to happen, and more about doing another step and like teasing out preferences.
I remember a few years ago, there was no scenario that allowed you to get Greg Newsome and Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, and it did work out. So is there a non-realistic scenario that must be realistic that you'd be thrilled about that you won't share with us here, but that afterwards I'm going to ask you, was that?
I mean, I'm sure I could think of a couple, but I'm not going to hold my breath that they would happen.
All right. What's been your most fun part of this draft process, getting a first-round pick again, going on all the tours, having all the visits? What's been the most fun part about this experience to you?
I'd say my favorite part of every draft process is getting to know the prospects and their families, early on. And you kind of walk out saying, man, you kind of build these relationships in the spring, but most of the individuals you meet, you actually don't get to add to your team. And so that's a little bit the sad part, because like the relationship kind of maybe tapers off from there, particularly with the family. But it's really cool to get to know them as people, to get to know their support system. That's the best part.
Well, AB, we appreciate the time. Obviously, big draft, big opportunity to really improve this franchise, and excited to see you get in there, get in that room right.
AB always leaves me with something, some kind of new saying that I've never heard before. They use it to tease out stress points. Okay.
Sure. I get it.
Yeah. Interesting. Thoughts on that interview? Any takeaways from Mr. Barry as just 48 hours away from the draft beginning?
It just reinforces my belief that one, the Browns should take the best player in the draft. Hopefully that is what they do. And then, hopefully we're going to be talking about a quarterback that they feel really good about that they will take. And if they can do those two things, then the other picks are no less important, but it just sets the table for everything else to be successful. And I think that becomes critical. Now, obviously the best case scenario would be the Browns don't have to trade the pick. They get to keep all 10 picks or even add more picks or do something else to improve the quality of the overall roster. But for the most part, I don't know that he said anything that was terribly earth-shattering other than maybe providing a little bit of pushback for the people who assume that the Travis Hunter thing is a complete done deal and that maybe they might need to take a pause and consider the fact that there is a world where the Browns could absolutely have a dominant defense, will be able to score enough points as they did in 2023 without necessarily using the second pick in the draft on offense to get there.
Okay, you're watching The React. That's the always amazing Pete Smith laying things out. My name's Brad Ward. Hit like and subscribe. Tell a friend. Keep it locked. Draft Cave 2025 starting Thursday night. Let's go to a video here. This is courtesy of 92.3 The Fan, Baskin and Phelps, as Phelps tells us why he's scared for the Browns to take Travis Hunter.
It's all speculation, but I think they're pretty set in what they're going to do, and I think they have been for weeks.
I'll give you an admission here, just between you and me.
Oh, good.
Travis Hunter scares me.
Why?
6 foot, 188 pounds. Wide receivers usually don't go 2. Corners usually don't go 2. I don't know that part-time play at one of those positions, I'm assuming it's corner if he'd be the Browns, makes him worthy of the second pick. And I just keep looking at Abdul Carter, and I know he's had some off-the-field stuff that is a little bit of a concern. But I keep looking at Abdul Carter and thinking, well, that guy's looking at a 10-year career, 12-year career, and 5 trips to the Pro Bowl. And I just keep thinking, that's a much safer pick because I'm assuming that his level of play is going to be really high.
I get what he's saying. I think they're both pretty safe picks, in my opinion, somewhat kind of inherently. I think that for me, like, Hunter is safe in that, like, if he doesn't work out in one area, you kind of have a fallback plan, right? Of course, injury being the, to his point, being the issue there. I would push back against the, 2 overall thing. Like, and I get that historically, that hasn't been the case with taking a guy at 2 overall. But you can only play the draft that's in front of you, and the draft that's in front of you this year is not the same as those other drafts. As far as, I mean, if you can take Denzel Ward at 4, then you should be able to take him at 2.
So far be it for me to normally agree with Jeff Phelps. I think he lays out the case against Travis Hunter very succinctly and effectively. I'm terrified of his weight. Straight up terrified. He does not weigh 188 pounds. Straight up. He doesn't. Like, that is inflated bullshit weight. And
wasn't he durable the last 2 years?
That's fine, but the problem you run into, if you find out that he's essentially like Denzel Ward density, and Denzel Ward has been beaten up, that gives you reason for pause. I think the Browns would be confident they can get more strength on him, but the problem you run into is when you are a guy, and obviously the Browns wouldn't necessarily be doing this with him, but when you're a guy who's playing 150 snaps in a game, it is really difficult to gain weight and keep it, which makes you wonder how much weight is he going to be able to add. So that is a real concern. And he's right. Receivers don't go this high, and they damn well don't go this high when they're that small. That doesn't mean Travis Hunter's not going to be good. It's just if you were to lay out the case, he nailed it. Like, that's straight up. That's all of it. And historically, defensive ends are the premier position. They go higher. Pass rushers always go higher.
I think
easier. Part of the thing that scares you with Travis Hunter is the unknown. We are speculating on a whole lot with him. You are projecting a whole lot more with him than everybody. And that's part of the draw with him is you're sitting there going, man, I wonder what all he can do.
I'm not like that, though. I'm not asking him. I don't care if he plays 2 ways. I just want him as a wide receiver. And if he plays on defense, great. That's a bonus for me. That's how I view it.
Point, to say that being part-time player on the other side of the ball doesn't sort of validate the extra, I get it. And I'm not saying, I'm fine with either one. But I totally understand why anyone would look at Travis Hunter and go, that's the number 2 pick in the draft, because you can think back, and that part of the reason I think Jeff Phelps is saying this is he can think of wide receivers who got drafted very early of a similar stature who just could not play. Sure. Desmond Howard jumps out at me immediately.
Yeah,
Desmond Howard, who went to the Washington football team, and basically almost day one, players on that team told the media, this dude can't play. And they took him 4th overall or whatever it was. So I completely get it. Now, none of that is to say that Browns shouldn't pick him because of those things. But if you were to lay out the case against, I think Jeff Phelps completely nailed it. And why you would sit there and go, take what feels like the safer option, which is the dominant edge rusher. And I'm sure part of the reason he feels that way is because he lives in the state of Ohio and he watched what Abdul Carter did against the best team in the country. Absolutely dominated them. Was the best player on the field. And he gives you that sort of peace of mind where, and I get this from particularly olds who go, taking a Big 12 legend isn't going to get you very far. And again, I don't think that's necessarily based in reality, because I would sit there and go, well, Patrick Mahomes played at Texas Tech, a Big 12 legend. Like, how do you feel about that one? But nevertheless, there's a comfort in people who saw a player like Abdul Carter dominate their team and the team that ultimately was the national champion and everything else. So
sure,
I am not saying that the Browns shouldn't take Travis Hunter or anything else, but I have all of the same concerns that Jeff Phelps does. It's just not enough for me to sit there and go, I'm not going to take him, but I completely understand.
I've watched every single offensive snap that Travis Hunter has played this very, very long off season in college. And I just can't imagine him not being successful at the next level. He's just a special, special, special player.
That's the same art. That's the same thing I heard from Dan Orlovsky today when he was doing the rounds. And I hope that I don't care if the Browns pick him or not. I hope that's true for Travis Hunter. Like, he's genuinely a sensation. I want to see it go as far as it can go. It would be genuinely disappointed whether he's a Brown or a Giant or somebody somewhere else if we're sitting here in 2 years and go, man, like, he just it didn't work in the NFL. Like, that would just suck from a football enjoyment standpoint. So I hope, for his sake, I hope he's great. But again, I get it. I get why anyone would sit there and look at him and go, is this who we're taking it to? Because God knows if it happens, Jeff Lloyd's going to be all over it, laying out this exact, carrying out this exact argument. So I will be very curious to see how it goes when they do it. Now, the thing I would sort of, because I've had this conversation in my own head, is sort of sitting there going, wide receivers this small do not go this early. And you sit there and go, well, the modern NFL has sort of changed a little bit. You're seeing more of these guys succeed.
Malik Neighbors, I mean,
he's thicker than Travis Hunter. But
no, he's not. He's not.
The guy I would pick is Devontae Smith in that conversation. I would not go with Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors
is not. I have looked 100 times. They are the exact same size.
Again, if you believe in phony weight.
Okay. All right. Yeah, he's got weights in his shoes. All right. I apologize.
If you found out that, if Travis Hunter's put on a scale the moment he's drafted, would it surprise you if he weighed 179?
No, and I don't care either.
But that's all I'm saying is that gets a little sketchy if you find out he's that light. And granted, there are reasons he could be that light at this stage in the game and all these other things. But still, if you found out the Browns took a 6-foot wide receiver in the 170s with the second pick overall, you might sit there and go, yeah.
Yeah, but then you'd put on his film and you're like, wow, this dude is super special.
Yeah.
Like once in a lifetime, maybe special.
But in terms of like the style of receiver, Devontae Smith, the Slim Reaper, is more in the terms of a guy where you can sit there and go, yeah, he's super skinny, but he's crushing it in the NFL. And that would be the easy case to make. I think Hunter's a little bit. I have to say, at his pro day, I was impressed. He got those little walking sticks, but he's got a really rocked up core and upper body. But whereas again, even if you're worried about Travis Hunter, it's very easy for you to turn on Devontae Smith and go, not only is Devontae Smith succeeding, he's succeeding in an NFC, a northern climate, playing in the NFC East, not exactly the same as the AFC North, but similar climate, temperature situations that you'd be facing.
I was just looking for a picture, a side by side. I can't find one right now, but you look at these pictures of Neighbors and him, and he looks no bigger, literally, than Hunter. He looks 0 pounds bigger than him.
Yeah,
I
pull up a picture of Cam Scatterbo and Quinshon Judkins, and Judkins is the bigger kid, and even though Scatterbo looks bigger.
Okay, good point. Yeah. So, I mean, I just think, I think they're both really good, and I'd be happy with either one. This has nothing to do with against Carter at all. So I'd be happy if they take Carter, but would it surprise anyone if Carter was 237? Yes, I would be stunned. I would be absolutely stunned if Carter was 237. Look at his linebacker film compared to him as an edge rusher. He is a giant compared to when he was a 235-pound linebacker. He is completely rocked up since then. It's not even close. Spare me that one. The difference is Colorado has a bad reputation when it comes to inflating fake weights. But I mean,
And Shedeur, and neither Hunter nor Shedeur weighed in at pro day after they both did at the combine, which is also super sketchy.
I don't care. You look at him, he is incredibly agile. Yes, he looks like he is light, but he is in the NFL. He is not going to be. I mean, come on. Look at other wide receivers around the league are just the same size as him, doing just fine. It's a different NFL. If he plays wide receiver and outside corner, he's not going to be even have that much contact. It's just a different league. He's not. Nobody's asking him to come up and play run fit. Like, you're not going to ask him to come up and play the run all the time. He's not going to be. I'm not going to ask him to play like safety run fits and stuff. Like, that's crazy. Like, he's going to play outside corner, and he's going to play wide receiver, and then he's only going to play outside corner for like 20 snaps a game, if that. The most. It's a fluid situation. First of all, I just want him as a wide receiver first. If he's 175 pounds, then he's freakishly good at 175 pounds. I'm going to trust my eyes on this one.
What are you talking about? Carter has been on a scale at pro day. He weighed 250 pounds. We have not seen a weight for Hunter since February. Like, that's utter nonsense. Anyway,
didn't he weigh in his pro day?
Huh?
They didn't weigh in at their pro days?
They did not. Everybody else in Colorado weighed in. They did not.
But they weighed in at the combine, though. So
they weighed in at the combine, where they did not do anything, which just
okay.
naturally
So what
leads
does
you
that?
to believe.
What's the discrepancy between the combine and the pro day?
Well, one happened almost 2 months after the other.
Okay, right. So in that amount of time, he lost a bunch of weight, is what you're saying?
What I'm suggesting is they put on fake weight, largely water, to weigh, then not do anything, because this has been a thing that's been done for years.
Do you really think, Pete, between me and you, do you really think that water weight makes a difference in if he can stay healthy in the NFL or not?
No, what I'm saying is
pounds of difference.
Players do this to make teams feel better about their weight. Now,
Sure.
Most teams are smart enough to sort of be cagey enough to sort of figure this thing out, but fans do not.
But it should not matter either way, whether if he gains 3 pounds of water weight or 5 pounds of water weight who cares? Who cares? That's not going to make the difference in him being injured or not.
The other part of this is, why is Hunter playing outside corner?
What do you mean?
Who's moving?
I'm just saying. What do you? Okay, then what do you want to do with him? Because I don't really care where he plays on defense. Once again, I like him as a wide receiver, and if they want to use him in the red zone or they want to use him as a joker player, whatever, figure that out. But it seems like it might be easier for him to play outside corner, considering that's what he did in college, and we don't know what's going to happen with Emerson, with Newsome in the future. We don't.
We know what's going to happen with Emerson. He's got play, and
right?
You can't put him at nickel
this year.
Sure, but ultimately, the problem you run into is
he's coming off a dog shit season, so he's got to show me something.
Are you going to move Emerson into the slot to get Hunter to the outside?
No.
Are you going to move Denzel Ward to the slot to put Hunter on the outside? So then naturally he's got one of two options. He's either going to play somewhere in the slot.
I already said that they can make a position for him,
or
he can do the third safety. You
but
can figure
the ultimate
that out.
thing you have to. Either way, it's a collision sport. Like we can talk ourselves into this idea that he's going to be less contacted than other positions. But what have we endured throughout for the Browns? Cedric Tillman just missed half a season with a concussion.
Sure.
Not to say that that's going to happen to Hunter, but this is the world. This is
Cedric
the game.
Tillman is, and to your point, I mean, to my point, that's a freak thing. Cedric Tillman's like 4 times the size of him.
Sure,
that's head
but
contact.
it's just
it has nothing to do with his weight. That's just part of the game.
Actually, it might. If play the same scenario, if Travis Hunter catches the ball, turns upfield, and a Pittsburgh Steeler freaking goes helmet to helmet on him, then
that's not any player, though, Pete.
Sure. What I'm saying is then he's not at a reduced risk of contact.
I get your point. So neither is Abdul Carter then.
Right. I absolutely agree. Like, but that's the thing is like with Abdul Carter, if you're making that case, you are making the case that he's going to make a lot of collisions and he's going to, what you hope is hit the opposing quarterback a whole lot.
Listen, this is a silly argument. The point I'm saying that from what I saw him play at his weight, I'm trusting my eyes, and that I think that 5 pounds at his combine to his pro day makes no difference in whether he's going to get hurt in the NFL or not. And to me, he's a wide receiver first, and whatever he does on the defensive side of the ball, I don't really care personally. But if they do put him in a package over there and he's successful, that's great. But I don't care whether he gained water weight at the combine. Do you really think that's going to make a difference in him getting injured?
No, what I'm saying is this is a way to make people feel like he's heavier than he is.
But it doesn't ultimately matter whether they feel that way or not.
Actually care. Again, if you found out
he's
170 pounds, 100 in the 170s, people will freak out. I promise you this will happen.
Okay.
People will lose their minds over the idea that he's 170 pounds at 179 pounds at the second pick of the draft. This is not debatable. It would absolutely happen. People would lose their collective shit over it.
Okay, those people can do that. That doesn't really matter. What matters is if Andrew Berry, Kevin Stefanski, and the people in the Browns locker room are okay with it. They can lose their shit all they want. I don't care.
The whole point of this is you played the clip. I didn't pick the clip. You picked Jeff Phelps' clip of elucidating all the concerns he has. I'm telling you, this is why it would be a concern. This is why this would be something.
And I'm telling you, I'm not concerned.
That's fine. You don't have to be. I'm explaining why somebody else would be.
Okay. I get it. I get why people would be concerned. But the whole like fake weight stuff, I'm not buying into that. Like,
it's a thing. It is absolutely a thing.
I get it. And it would make fans feel better. But ultimately, the GM's not going to be duped by water weight at the combine.
No, what I'm saying, well, here's the GM knows.
No.
It's just a question of if it matters enough.
Yes. And ultimately, if he takes him, then he's comfortable with it.
Right. Nevertheless,
then we'll find out.
Nevertheless, there will be a whole lot of people who sit there and go, we just used the second pick on a draft, a guy who's not even 180 pounds. They will lose their collective shit. That's just how it goes. Now, that doesn't stop him from being a great player, but that will be the immediate reaction. We just drafted a tiny wide receiver who's going to get hurt. That will be what you hear. That doesn't mean it's based in reality, but you will guaranteed hear that. We will be reacting to clips of that exact sentiment.
And I will say, I don't care. He's a terrific player.
Likewise,
I don't care if he weighs 170, 175.
Travis Hunter, if they pick him, will be the most second-guessed player in NFL history. I'm just telling you right now. And that's not just the pick. What I mean by that is a larger context. Travis Hunter, how he's handled will be second-guessed every step of the way. Every snap he's on the field will be second-guessed. Every snap he's not on the field will be second-guessed. This is going to be this is the world we will be entering with Travis Hunter, because the imagination with him is so vast and what he can accomplish. So even though he could have extraordinarily normal, whether it's a hamstring issue, whether it's a mistake, whether it's whatever it is, this is going to be the world that you exist in. Everybody's going to sit there. There's always going to be somebody popping off going, well, they shouldn't have played in both ways, or, hey, they're playing in both ways. Why wasn't he in for this crucial play? I mean, we did this. We went through this with Nick Chubb as a running back not being in certain situations, like Travis Hunter. And again, none of this is a reason not to take him, but this is the world where like it's going to be so sensationalized and focused on everything he does. Now that's great for us because everybody's going to want to know what he's doing. But nevertheless, it's going to be a weird dynamic where we are going to hyper focus on this kid to the point where, not that it's going to necessarily make him succeed, fail, or anything else, but just like everything is going to be, so overanalyzed before he ever sets foot in the ground in a meaningful game. It's going to, at some point, drive us all insane.
I guess. I mean, it's not going to drive me insane. I'm fine with it, because I think he's a special player, and I think that he's a generational talent. You don't?
I think he's fantastic. But again, I'm elucidating Jeff Phelps's argument, which I have those same concerns. I am genuinely worried about his ability to gain and hold weight given what he's been doing. The amount of reps and wear and tear on the body is going to make that difficult. And what my hope for Travis Hunter is if they pick him, great. Let's not even address reality. Let's just everybody's a superstar. Cool. I hope that's the world we live in. What I'm hoping will happen is Travis Hunter will find a way to gain weight that will allow him to sort of play the sort of negotiated compromise of snaps. He was playing legitimately, and I think this is where the Browns would be sort of pushing back on the notion that he's going to have a tough time getting weight. He's playing 150 snaps, in some of these games. Like the amount of I would be very curious if they do that sort of mileage tracker like they do with soccer players. Just the amount of distance he's covering in a game,
and the average snaps in the pros are much less,
lower, right? So, and if he's only playing part time, let's say he goes from I think it was 150 against TCU that first game. Let's say it drops to 75, or 80, which would be a spectacular number of snaps in the NFL. I'm hoping that he can find a weight that sort of allows him to sort of find a middle ground where he can still do all the things he's doing, because I suspect when you're playing that many snaps, it doesn't really allow you to carry that extra weight because it's also going to sort of diminish your conditioning. And that's one of the things that makes him special. And again, I'm not suggesting this is a problem. What I'm hoping is the Browns have a plan to find this and make it a solution so he can be special in as many plays as possible. To your point, and the position we share, I would love nothing more than we find out, because he's going to be playing so much more offense, and most, even if he's even if he's on the field the entire game on offense, that we're going to sit there and go, man, he got 195 pounds, he's thickened up a little bit, and he's just adding to what he's already been doing to this point in his career, that he's just going to be more Travis Hunter than ever, as opposed to the concern that you and I have shared on this is they ask too much of him, and now he's sort of diminished, and he can't hold up not only the demands of the game, but just physically, because you are putting so much mileage on contact, all these other things. But yes, I agree with you. He is, unless you go back to Goldie Lockbaum at Holy Cross in the late 80s, you don't see guys do this. And even Goldie Lockbaum, who was a Heisman, who was a finalist for the Heisman twice, went in the 9th round of the draft to the Steelers in '88. That's the difference between that and Travis Hunter, who's doing the double duty thing and is going to be, is being discussed as arguably the best prospect in the entire draft. That's what is both what allows the imagination to run wild. The idea that this guy could go and have 120 yards receiving and get the game-winning interception. That is an insane thing to sort of, that's a mind-blowing possibility if he can reach it. But the worry you obviously, the counterbalance to that is he's not big enough. He gets physically beat up by guys who are just doing one thing at a supremely high level, entirely focused, and he can't hack it. Now, I'm hoping
why I have said from the beginning.
Yeah, and I agree with you.
I want him to be a wide receiver first and foremost.
Yes.
And it's a fluid situation. As he becomes a professional receiver and elite at it, you can work him in situations on defense. But the first thing he needs to do is become an all-pro level wide receiver before we start talking about him having packages on the defensive side of the ball.
I agree with you. I think the thing that's going to be really interesting if the Browns pick Hunter is the first press conference they have talking about him, and then every proceeding, what's Andrew Berry going to say about him, then what Kevin Stefanski is going to say about it, what is Tommy Rees going to say about it, what is Jim Schwartz going to say about it, because obviously they would have had to sort of figure this thing out, and presumably, as you and I have sort of discussed in multiple shows, presented that vision to him.
Yeah, they've had to have multiple conversations with him between each other and laid this out to him. And so if they don't take him, we'll know that they weren't comfortable with whatever
Right.
he expect. There's an expectation from him too, right? He's made that clear. So
Yes.
if they take him, then we know that they've had those conversations and they're comfortable with it, right?
Absolutely. So, and that's the thing. Like, even though you and I can both say these conversations and this vision has been presented and obviously would have been sort of agreed to by all parties if they make this selection, we still don't really know what that looks like. And that's the thing. And again, that's sort of the mystery of this pick. Abdul Carter, it's easy. He's going to rush the passer. Maybe he's going to play some linebacker at points,
Yeah.
but you know exactly what he's going to do. Travis
And he
Hunter, you're sitting
fits
there going,
perfectly.
he's probably going to be the wide receiver. He's probably going to be the X. And then when they get, Njoku and Tillman on the field, he's going to be a guy who can move, play off the line a little bit and move around from that standpoint. But like after that, you're sitting there and it's sort of like, okay, what is this really going to look like? And that's sort of intriguing in some ways, but also like terrifying in others.
I would also contend that, so we looked this up on All Eyes on Cleveland. I think the average amount of snaps on one side of the ball is like 63 in the NFL. So if you're playing 63 offensive snaps and you have multiple wide receivers, I mean, he doesn't have to play all 60. I mean, no wide receiver really does that often. Say he plays 45 on offense and 15 to 20 on defense, then you're talking about 60-ish snaps. And it's not that outrageous, at least
No,
to some point.
But I mean, like, presented with the choice of 45 and 15 or all 60, you're probably going to pick the all 60, I imagine, right?
I would prefer him to play offense for all 60, yes.
And that's sort of like, that's the weird push and pull dynamic. I suspect, and we'll see, I suspect his goal is never coming off the field on offense.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, nobody really does that in the NFL. I mean, they sub guys in and out all the time.
They do, and that's why this is what makes him so interesting as a player. We just don't know what this is going to look like, and it could be phenomenal. He could be everything. You're just, you're sitting there going, man, the Browns took this thing and nobody really knows what it's going to be. And that's really interesting and really exciting on one hand. And it's just a question of what is it ultimately going to look like? And it's going to be really interesting summer of watching this play itself out, because he is appointment viewing. I don't care what team he gets drafted to. And this is a benefit to the Browns in many ways. If the Browns pick him, everybody's going to want to see with this kid's first game.
Yep.
And every other week. Like, there are going to be people who never thought about watching the Browns who are going to want to just see what this kid can do, which is really interesting from our standpoint, because obviously, other than Joe Flacco's run at the end of the year, we haven't really had that for the past decades. So that part is really cool. But and I hope it's all those things it can be, because he is so special. I just hope that they have a plan that's going to allow him to do all those things.
And believe me, I get the appeal of and the ease at which you just take Abdul Carter and put him in the wide 9 and say go. And he's a perfect fit in Cleveland and all that. I get that. While this other thing is so complicated, but nobody said it was going to be easy, and great things sometimes are difficult.
Well, and the thing that the other thing where listening to Barry, not only that press conference, but just his overall vision on the draft, what did he say? We're worried about the end product. And everybody thinks about that as quarterback, but that's been his MO on all these guys. So how much of that is, how much do they view Travis Hunter, the rookie, versus Travis Hunter in year 3? And I don't know that anybody knows the answer to that, because he's such a unique player. Is he going to largely enter the NFL and be what he is, or is he going to be a guy, because he hasn't been asked to block anybody, he hasn't been asked to be a proficient route runner, he's barely practiced being a wide receiver at this point in his career. He's largely been working almost exclusively at cornerback and then just told, hey, run this. during games. Like, it's going to be a different world. So on some level, you're sitting there going, man, and this is part of the reason I can talk myself into ignoring some of the things that sort of scream at me and go, you should be worried about this, is if you now get to focus him with Casey Kinnaman's favorite position coach on the team, Chad O'Shea, working his magic, that is this going to sort of unlock him in a way that we haven't seen it? Or again, is he sort of what he is? Because like I am in awe of his talent. The and one routes he ran at Pro Day were utterly meaningless to me.
Agreed.
So
like
I'm
there's no
very
polish.
fascinated to see all of this go out, which is why I'm hoping like if I'm purely from and this is where Barry's ready to chip in and go, and I purely from a business standpoint, I'm purely pitching this from an OBR standpoint. I'm sitting here, pick Travis Hunter twice, pick him 3 times, because he's going to be must view, must watch, must read, must subscribe content, because you've never seen anything like this before. So I totally get it, but I can't help but like get the Jeff Phelps out of the back of my head that sits there and goes, well, are you considering these things? Because they are real.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. I get the ease at which Carter makes sense, and I get the
which is not to say that Carter is not without his own risks. It's just there's a comfort in being able to look at Carter and go, I know exactly what he's doing.
Right. But at the same time, and while I'll concede that his weight can be a concern for some, and I understand that concern, I just watch him move on a football field, and it's different than a lot of people that I've ever seen move on a football field. And I think that with polish, and to your point, the tremendous coaching of Chad O'Shea,
the
at
great
wide
Chad
receiver,
O'Shea.
and he builds on his route tree and becomes more of a professional wide receiver instead of just winging it and being tagged with a route like he was at Colorado. Then that should common sense would tell you that will net a better result.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Like, it's such a disappointment that Colorado couldn't do better relative to their schedule, that we couldn't get them to play a real defense. Like, I can't think of who the best corner he played. Maybe Jacob Parrish. I don't even know if they played K-State. Did they play K-State? Yeah, they played K-State.
Yeah.
I don't even know if he covered him in that game. But like, that's the other thing that sort of sits there and goes, is sort of a little bit of a siren. But again, he's outstanding. He's just different. So I totally get it.
Let's finish up. We have just about 10 minutes.
How dare you besmirch the honor of one Chad O'Shea?
The last 10 minutes, let's talk about, with the draft coming up, just a couple days away, who are some of your favorite guys? Who are your guys that you would love for the Browns to take day 2, day 3?
Well, obviously it's going to depend on where they end up drafting. I wrote today I would bet on Jalen Milroe. I'm in love with the kid. And then the physical talent oozing out of him sort of gets you where you want to go with the rest of it. But the kid, it's ultimately what I'm betting on with him. It depends. Obviously, it depends on where the Browns go in terms of the first pick. I'm very intrigued by Trey Harris out of Ole Miss.
Same.
If they take Abdul Carter, I like Jackson Dart, but one of the things that's sort of inescapable with watching Jackson Dart at Ole Miss is how many times Trey Harris sort of bails him out with a contested catch. He's got size to play outside. That part is really interesting to me. There's a lot of things that don't fit sort of my MO. He's a little bit older, but there are certain things he does that I find very interesting. The worry you have with him is that he's going to turn into Cedric Tillman and just have another one of those, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but yeah. I think the Browns want to get more explosives out of that position, and I don't know that another one of those would necessarily get you there. Let's see. Day 2, day 3. Linebackers, day 3 and undrafted free agent.
Day 3.
I love Chandler Martin from Memphis. Sean Dolak, the linebacker from Buffalo, is really interesting. I know there are a lot of people who's a very big fan club of him. The reason I mention him is because the Browns have an assistant coach. They hired their assistant defensive line coach who was at the University of Buffalo. So, and again, we've talked about this. The amount of insight the Browns have in other programs, I'm curious if that is a factor at all. Now, they aren't using a premium pick to get a Sean Dolak, but nevertheless, that would be an interesting connection if that is important to them.
What do you think about guys like so like this linebacker class strikes me as a day 3, right? Like
linebacker position is a day 3 pick, but yes.
Yeah. But even more so in this class because there are some interesting guys like Jay Higgins, I think is interesting from Iowa, Kobe King from Penn State. I just want your opinion on these guys. Nick Martin is somewhat interesting, I think. And I know everybody in the chat is going to want to say Cody Simon, but because he's from Ohio State. But thoughts on those guys?
There are other defensive players on Penn State. Nick Martin's the one that jumps out at me. The Browns had him in for a visit. In terms of metrics, he's right there with the top guys in the class. Now, the difference is he's like 15 pounds lighter than everybody else, which is going to be a little bit of a concern, but he's very athletic, extremely productive. Incidentally, picked off Will Howard for a game-winning interception when Will Howard was still at Kansas State. He's, to me, fits the type of linebackers that Jim Schwartz wants, which are guys who can run, cover a lot of ground. That's really important to him. But like, if you're talking about value, man, Nick Martin jumps out at you as a guy who could be an intriguing value that late. Iowa linebackers are Iowa linebackers are Iowa linebackers. You sort of know what you're getting with those type of guys, big tough dudes who are going to clog up running lanes and do some stuff like that. So that's always
he's fast though. Higgins can move.
Yeah. Which look, I would think at this point that's a prerequisite. I know what they did last year in the 6th round. I still don't get it with Watson.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Given everything I've learned about Jim Schwartz and what he wants in that position and just defense in general, it's really hard for me to believe he doesn't want somebody who cannot run. I mean, they brought back Devin Bush. They've got JOK. Whatever his status is going to be.
What do we know anything from him showing up today?
It's required. That's all we know.
I know, but like, there's no other news, right?
I mean, the Browns have been very consistent in their messaging with Andrew Berry saying nebulous timeline and all that. And until he's playing until the prospect of putting pads on is a thing, I suspect he can do just about everything else. But until that happens, and we don't know when that's going to happen, and the mere fact that the Browns have done as much as they can to safeguard the position with or without him is causing at least Jack Duffin to draw that conclusion that he won't be available at least for this season.
I mean, I like the signing of the kid from Ohio State. Bring some speed to the position, right? Free agency. At the same time, for an exercise, if there was one player, one wide receiver in this draft that you wouldn't want the Browns to take, I'll say 1, 2 on the count of 3. Let's see if we say the same name.
Wait, receiver I don't want them to take?
You don't want them to take, all right? And I'll say 3, 2, 1, and you say it. Ready?
I have no idea. So just tell me who you're thinking of.
Isaiah Bond.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. So beyond I understand the appeal. The problem is he's got off the field questions. The other problem you run into is when you watch the tape, it looks like Anthony Schwartz all over again, where it's a bunch of end arounds and manufactured touches and him just running into space, which doesn't mean that cannot work. The Chiefs have obviously found ways to make that work with guys. But if you have if you have Schwartz PTSD on that, Isaiah Bond is not going to make you feel any better. Like you see him catch about no passes for Texas this year, and not when their offense is supposed to be super explosive. And I get it. Quinn Ewers in a lot of ways was Auburn Bo Nix in terms of his accuracy down the field. But still, like you watch it and you're just like, ugh, I don't know. So yeah, I totally understand. What the thing with Isaiah Bond is I think there are other guys that can sort of give you that element that aren't him. One
Kyle
of them
Williams, please.
Kyle Williams is interesting. There's
Love him.
There's an Antonio Brown element to his game, I think,
Love him.
because he's just very quick,
Crafty.
and he gets the ball in his hands. He just sort of scoots and beats people up. The guy who's extremely flawed but nevertheless intriguing is Ty Felton for me from Maryland.
Yep.
Because
I agree.
he has 1 million drops, and that's going to a whole bunch of people are already out on.
Yeah.
But he's got real speed.
Still like
And he's
him.
weirdly efficient in the red zone.
Yeah.
Like it stands out efficient. Like the wide receiver I love, and I don't think the Browns are going to be remotely interested in, is Pat Bryant from Illinois. But
yeah, I just heard somebody talk. You've been saying that for a long time. We've been
our
talking.
underdog was all over him today. Yeah, that's yeah.
Yeah. And then
his metrics are great. I just here again in the same way that
40 time he ran a bad 40,
4.6,
didn't he?
4.61. Yeah, he's that's not his game, and that's why I ultimately think the Browns aren't going to take him.
But on film, he doesn't look like 4.61. He looks faster than that on film.
Agree. So who knows? Maybe there's a world where the Browns, they have their in-game tracking where they feel really good about him. But to me, it's a lot like linebacker. I think the Browns are very married to the idea of getting explosiveness. And even though Trey Harris is a 4.5 guy on the 40, like in game, you see a little bit more of his ability to make plays downfield. And it's his ball tracking and his ability to make plays in traffic that sort of really sells you on him. But that's part of the reason that Travis Hunter's so intriguing is because he brings you all those elements. Even though, I'd be very curious to know what Travis Hunter runs on the 40. I suspect it's not that impressive, but then you watch him catch a screen for Colorado and suddenly he's like running over the horizon, or guys are like going behind, but on the horizon behind him. Like he's just good with the ball in his hands. And, it's the same thing with like Nick Chubb, who ran 4.54, I think, coming out of Georgia. And then he gets on the field
away from every DB in the league.
Super fast. So, one of those questions I would love to get a real answer to in terms of like, how do the Browns weigh, athletic testing versus GPS data and the athleticism they can sort of derive from in-game speed. And I'm sure PFF has put some of the data out somewhere. I don't know what the game athletic scores are for a lot of these guys. I'd be very curious to know if Travis Hunter's is super high, because that would obviously make you feel really good about him, in addition to all the other things that make you feel good about him. But other guys that I really like, Katan Crawford I hate this safety class with a passion. I hate it. But I love Katan Crawford from Nevada, former Texas.
I like the Bowman kid. He's not really a safety. He's a safety. He's listed as safety, but he's more of a nickel. But Billy Bowman I like a lot from this class, I think, as a late guy.
Crawford started at Texas. He special teams demon, and then had some pretty good tape this year. I identified him as sort of like the D'Anthony Bell potential replacement as a late round guy when they're in those 6th and 7th round pick.
All right. Time's running out. Last question real quickly. So this question was, I'm losing my mind. I apologize for my stuttering and my incoherent noise making right now. McShay today said that he was told by one of his favorite sources. Funny, right?
I just love the concept of one of his favorite sources, opposed to
one of his best sources, whatever. But he's fun. He's so into it, and it's funny to watch him when he's like, and he's all fired up and stuff. And he's all fired up. But he was talking about this, and he was like, he kind of like me right now. He can't get his thought out. But he was saying that he was told to stop thinking so narrowly like everybody else. And this is in regards to the first round of the draft. Stop thinking so narrowly like everyone else in the media is doing right now. How would you interpret that?
Well, it's to me, it ties back to what you talked about before, which is like
Quarterback?
No, it has more to do with the talent disparity, or I should say how the talent flattens out, where you go from after those top 4 to 5 guys, and then you enter this flat spot, just how far that flat area extends.
Yeah.
In other words, you could end up with an offensive tackle or pass rusher you did not expect to go in the first round because those are the position that everybody can't get enough of. And, you know, they may feel good enough about a guy that people are thinking about as a second round guy. Like the Jets took a 24-year-old edge rusher out of Iowa State a couple of years ago, 16th overall. And he was a guy that was projected to go to the Browns in the second round, which I thought was preposterous for that. And the Browns and the Jets took him in the first round, which blew me away. It was the Kenny Pickett draft. That is, I think, more along the lines of what he's talking about, where there may be runs on the edge rusher is the one that jumps out at me. 6 or 7 could go anyway, but like there may be a feeling of we got to go, and we got to, especially if guys start like if the 49ers take one and some of these other teams that like the Saints take one, and suddenly there goes, oh crap, they're all going. Then that's where I could see teams doing the offensive tackle is the other one. Like I know there's this dream that people have that Josh Connerly is going to somehow be there at 33. I don't see it happening. But not only that, I could see, would not shock me if a guy like Ariante Ursary sneaks into the bottom of the first round, even though there are a lot of people who don't like him at all. You cannot teach 6'7", 330 pounds. And there are going to be people who, and I know Mel Kiper's one of them, who go, and it was early in the year, who go, I know Abdul Carter got a whole lot better as the year went on, but he did better than anybody else did against Abdul Carter. And that's another guy I could see sneak into that. Donovan Jackson's a guy I could easily see at the bottom of the first round. Like the pass rushers and the big boys go fast, especially if we sort of see the NFL collectively go, this ain't it at quarterback.
And it's some other positions like
wide receiver could be the weird one that like,
you
know, where all, I'm not going to suggest anything crazy like none of them are going to go in the first round, but there have been years where we're sitting there, you know, 12, 16, and then all of a sudden it's none of them are going until the 20s.
Yeah.
It could be a weird situation like that. So I think that is the narrow-minded of team guys get caught up in the same 35 to 40 guys. And it may be that range need to extend to 50 guys that could be in the first round.
Yeah, it's like a themed draft that repeats itself, and it's not always the case. There's going to be ebbs and flows, but like I heard this today, and I'll finish on this, but like at these positions that are typically, you know, teams are looking and starving for, you know, wide receiver, your best wide receiver outside of Travis Hunter would have been 4 through 6 last year. Your best quarterback this year would have been 4 through 6 last year. Your best offensive lineman would have been 4 or 5 last year. And somehow that changes the draft in a major way. So
absolutely. In the same way that, like, you know, you're seeing all these people talk about, oh, there could be a million trades. The same reason, because there are this many possibilities. Whereas in past years, last year being a good example, we didn't know exactly how it was going down, but we had a pretty damn good idea how those first, 10 picks were going to go, all those quarterbacks, and then everything else sort of shook out from there.
Yeah. Like, I mean, there could be an incredible value from just moving a pick from this year into next year, ultimately.
Stands to reason that at some point that makes sense for the Browns to do it. It's just a question of when and what the deal looks like.
All right, let's get out of here. We'll have full draft coverage. Garage Beers is next. Get your beers. Go to the garage. Parting words, Pete.
Yeah, subscribe to the OBR. We're going to have a bunch of stuff come out tomorrow in terms of the latest of what we're hearing. So stay tuned for that.
Fantastic. And make sure you're locked into Draft Cave 2025 Thursday. And 2QB or not to QB tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Make
If
sure
you thought
didn't
Ivan
like
Carter
the-
and Travis Hunter, wait till Jeff Lloyd gets here. Wait till Jeff Lloyd gets here.
I
Takes
don't
his
wanna
belt
hear it.
off.
I know. Takes his belt off. Okay. We'll see how that goes. And then so stick around. It'll be fun as Pete just previewed for draft coverage. So we'll be here for all of it and take you through the good, the bad, the ugly of many hours of coverage. Draft Cave 2025 starting tomorrow night with a little video at 7. And stay tuned for Garage Beers. Mike's going to yell at me, and I'll see you over there in a few minutes. Thanks for watching. For Pete Smith, my name is Brad Ward. This has been The React. We are out.